Okay, so this is the review for test number 4. So number 1 is to rationalize the denominator and express in simplest form. So 1a is 10 minus the square root of 6 over 4 the square root of 2. So I have a monomial in the denominator, so I just have to multiply by the square root of 2. So in the numerator, since I do have a binomial, I have to make sure I distribute the square root of 2. So it's 10 the square root of 2 minus the square root of 12 over, so I have 4, so remember this is all times in here, 4 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4, which is 2. So it's 4 times 2. And then I'm going to simplify the square root of 12 here. So it's the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, which is 2 the square root of 3. So I have 10 the square root of 2 minus 2 the square root of 3 over 8. And then I do want to simplify this. So it's 10 the square root of 2 over 8 minus 2 the square root of 3 over 8. So 10 and 8 reduce to 5 and 4. So it's 5 the square root of 2 over 4 minus, and 2 and 8 reduce to 1 and 4, so it's the square root of 3 over 4. All right, let's take a look at 1b. Okay, so 1b is 2 over 5 plus the square root of 5. So I have a binomial in the denominator, so I multiply by the conjugate, which is 5 minus the square root of 5. So make sure you distribute the 2. So I have 10 minus 2 the square root of 5 over, so we double distribute, 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times negative the square root of 5 is 5. Negative square root of 5. Negative 5 the square root of 5. The square root of 5 times 5 is 5 the square root of 5. And the square root of 5 times negative the square root of 5 is negative the square root of 25, which is just going to be minus 5. Alright, so I have 10 minus 2 the square root of 5 over. Those cancel, and I have 25 minus 5, which is 20. And now we reduce 10 over 20 minus 2 the square root of 5 over 20, which is 1/2 minus, this reduces to 1 and 10, the square root of 5 over 10. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3. So number 3 says, number 2, I don't know why I said 3. Number 2 is to find the inverse of the function. So I have f of x is equal to 3x plus 8. So remember, inverse means to switch x and y. So I switch x and y, I get x equals 3y plus 8. Solve for y, so minus 8. X minus 8 equals 3y. Divide both sides by 3. So I get x over 3 minus 8 over 3 is equal to my y. And that is a function, so it is the inverse of f of x is equal to 8x over 3 minus 8 over 3. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2b. So I have h of x is equal to negative the square root of x plus 8. So I have y is equal to negative the square root of x plus 8. Switch x and y. So now minus 8. So x minus 8 is equal to negative the square root of y. Now before you could square both sides to get rid of the radical, you have to get rid of the negative 1. Because you have to isolate that radical. So it's negative x plus 8 equals the square root of y. Now square both sides to get rid of the radical. So that is 8 minus x squared is equal to y. So that is the inverse of h of x is equal to 8 minus x squared. Okay, so let's take a look at 3. Okay, so number 3 is to find the polynomial function whose zeros are given. So my zeros are x is equal to 0, and I have x is equal to the square root of 5. Now remember, when you have a square root, you have to have a plus minus. So you have to know that it's plus minus, even if it's only given at the plus. So you have to know that there's a negative there too. All right, so I'm going to start with this here. X is equal to plus minus the square root of 5. So one way that you would have gotten a square root in your answer would be either to have complete the square or use the quadratic formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the square backwards. So to get rid of the square root, I square both sides. So I get x squared is equal to 5. And then just minus 5 from both sides, and I get x squared minus 5 is equal to 0. So now if I have x is equal to 0 is my other 0, then x is a factor. So now I have this factor, now I have to multiply by x. So distribute the x, I get x cubed minus 5x is equal to 0. So that is number 3. Okay, so now let's go on to 3b. Alright, so my zeros are 5, x equals 5, and x is equal to 2 plus minus the square root of 2. So I'm going to start with this first. So x equals 2 plus minus the square root of 2. So I'm going to minus 2 from both sides. X minus 2 equals plus minus the square root of 2. To get rid of the square root, we square both sides. So I have x minus 2 times x minus 2 equals 2. So it's x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 2 minus 2. So I get x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. All right, so now my other factor here, right, if x is equal to 5, that's x minus 5 is my factor. So now I have to multiply this by x minus 5. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it below. And start multiplying. So I have negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Negative times 5 times negative 4x is positive 20x. Negative 5 times x squared is negative 5x squared. And then I have x times 2 is 2x. X times negative 4x is negative 4x squared. X times x squared is x cubed. And add them straight down. We get x cubed minus 9x squared plus 22x minus 10 is equal to 0. And you have to make sure you have equals to 0 on both of these, otherwise it would not be correct. I'll definitely take a point off if you don't have equals 0. Okay, so let's take a look at number 4. All right, so number 4 is to find all possible rational zeros. Okay, so I have f of x is equal to 2x cubed minus 5x squared plus 7x minus 17. So remember, the possible rational zeros are the factors of your constant divided by the factors of your leading coefficient. Okay, so my constant is 17, so it's plus minus 1 times plus minus 17. Okay, so 17 is prime, so it's just 1 and 17. Over the factors of the leading coefficient, which is 2, so it's plus minus 1, and plus minus 2 is the only thing that gives me 2. All right, so my possible rational zeros are the combinations, right, your division here. So I have plus minus 1 divided by plus minus 1 is plus minus 1. Plus minus 1 divided by plus minus 2 is plus minus 1/2. Plus minus 17 over 1 is plus minus 17 over 1, which is just plus minus 17. And then we have plus minus 17 over 2, which would be plus minus 17 over 2. Okay, so those are all your possible rational zeros. Okay, so let's take a look at B. Okay, so B is g of x so I have g of x is equal to 3x cubed plus 32x squared plus 32x plus 27. Okay, so my constant factors are plus minus 1 and plus minus 27, and plus minus 3 and plus minus 9, over plus minus 1 and plus minus 3, gives me 3. Okay, so now I need my possible rational zeros, or we got plus minus 1 over plus minus 1, right? Plus minus 1 over plus minus 1. Plus minus 1 over plus minus 3. So that's 1/3. Plus minus 3 over plus minus 1 is plus minus 3. Plus minus 3 over plus minus 3 is 1, right? 3 divided by 3 is 1. But I already have that, so I don't need to write it again. Plus minus 9 over plus minus 1 is plus minus 9. Plus minus 9 over plus minus 3 would be plus minus 3. I have that. Plus minus 27 over 1 would be plus minus 27. And then I have plus minus 27 over plus minus 3 would be plus minus 9, and I already have that. So those are my possible rational zeros. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. Okay, so number 5 is, that whole long process of factoring your polynomial so that you can find your zeros, but it's not something that we can factor. Even though it's 4 terms, it might look like it, but if we try to group, it doesn't actually work. So we have to figure out different ways. We have to find a zero, and then start breaking it down using division. All right, so I'm starting off with f of x. This is the one that's the long process. Equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 23x plus 60. All right, so I find my possible rational zeros. So what gives me 60? So we have a bunch of things that give me 60. So it's plus minus 1. And let's see, plus minus 60. That gives me 60. Plus minus 2 and 30. Plus minus 3 and 20. Plus minus 4 and 15. Plus minus 5 and 12. And I have plus minus 6. Sorry, and I kind of ran out of room. Plus minus 10. Over plus minus 1. So when you divide by 1, you just get all those numbers in the top. All right, so let me write my possible rational zeros. So possible rational zeros. All right, or plus minus 1, plus minus 2, plus minus 3, plus minus 4, plus minus 5, plus minus 6, plus minus 10, plus minus 12, plus minus 15, plus minus 20, plus minus 30, and plus minus 60. All right, so now you're going to put this in the graphing calculator. Plug that into your graphing calculator. And look to see where you think it crosses the x-axis. And then we're going to evaluate. So when you plug it in, it looks like it crosses at 3. So we're going to try f of 3. So I take 3 and I plug it into my equation. And then I evaluate. And I'm looking for 0 because when I do f of 3 and I get 0, that means 3 is 0, and then I have a factor. So when I plug this in, I do actually get 0. So that means x equals 3 is a 0. And then it means x minus 3 is a factor. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite this here. So I have f. Actually, I'm not going to rewrite it yet. I'm going to actually start breaking this down using synthetic division. So I have 3 is a 0. Write down all my coefficients, 1, negative 2, negative 23, and 60. So I bring down the 1, I get 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Times 3 is 3. Negative 23 times 3 is negative 20. Times 3 is negative 60, and I get 0. Okay, so now I know this. If I started off with f of x equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 23x plus 60. And I know that one of my factors so far is this. So that's x minus 3. And then when I do my long division, this gives me my other factor here. So this is your x squared plus x minus 20. And now you have to factor x squared plus x minus 20. And when you factor this, so I'll bring down the x minus 3. And I get x and x, so I have positive 5 and negative 4. And now I have to find my zeros, so I make f of x equals 0. And now I make my t-chart. So I get x equals 3, x equals negative 5, and x is equal to 4. Those are my zeros. Okay, so let's take a look at 5b. All right, so 5b is g of x is equal to 10x to the third minus 59x squared minus 8x plus 12. Okay, so I'm looking for my rational zeros. So the constant is 12, so it's plus minus 1 plus minus 12, plus minus 2 times plus minus 6, plus minus 3, and plus minus 4, over what gives me 10, plus minus 1, plus minus 10, plus minus 2, and plus minus 5. Okay, so now my zeros are going to be my possible rational zeros, actually. Okay, so we have plus minus 1 over plus minus 1 is 1. Plus minus 1. We have plus minus a half, plus minus 1/5, plus minus 1/10, plus minus 2, plus minus 2/5, plus minus 3, plus minus 3/2, plus minus 3/5, plus minus 3/10, plus minus 4, plus minus 2, plus minus 4/5, plus minus 6, plus minus 6/5, plus minus 12, plus minus 12/5, and plus minus 6/5. All right, so you plug that into the calculator so that we don't have to sit here and start checking these. So plug it in the calculator and look to see which one you think crosses the x-axis. So it looks like it crosses the x-axis at 6. So now we're going to evaluate. 10 times 6 cubed minus 59 times 6 squared minus 8 times 6 plus 12. So plug that into your calculator, and yes, we get 0, which means x equals 6 is a 0. And it also means that x minus 6 is a factor. All right, so now we're going to use long division to start breaking it down. So I put 6 on the outside. My coefficients are 10, negative 59, negative 8, and 12. All right, so I bring down the 10, I get 10. Times 6 is 60. Negative 59 plus 60 is 1. Times 6 is 6. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. Times 6 is negative 12. And yes, I get 0. Okay, so now this is what I know. G of x is equal to 10 x to the third minus 59x squared minus 8x plus 12. I know one of my factors from here, right, and that's x minus 6. And now I need this factor, and that is 10x squared plus x minus 2. Okay, now I'm going to factor that. So this factors, and that becomes 5x minus 2 and 2x plus 1. And now I want my zeros, so I make my y 0. And then I make my t-chart. I get x equals 6, x equals 2/5, and x equals negative 1/2. Okay, so let's go on to number 6, please. Okay, so number 6 is to perform the indicated operation. So 6a is 3 minus I plus 6 minus 8i. So we just combine like terms. So 3 plus 6 is 9, negative 5i. Negative 5i minus 8i is negative 13i. Okay, so that was A. B. 1 minus 9i minus 8 plus 3i. Since we are subtracting, we have to distribute that negative. So it's 1 minus 9i minus 8 minus 3i. So 1 minus 8 is negative 7. negative 9i minus 3i is negative, oh, I'm sorry, this, yeah. So I'm sorry, actually this should have been a plus. So that's a plus. So I have now 9i minus 3i is positive 6i. Okay, so let's take a look at C. So C is multiplying, so it's 4 plus 6i times 2 minus i. So I double distribute. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times negative I is negative 4i. 6i times 2 is 12i. 6i times negative I is negative 6i squared. Combine like terms, the minus 6i squared becomes actually plus 6. So that's 8 plus 6 is 14. Negative 4i plus 12i is positive 8i. All right, so let's take a look at D. All right, so D is 3 minus 5i squared, which is 3 minus 5i times 3 minus 5i. So double distribute. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times negative 5i is negative 15i. Negative 5i times 3 is negative 15i. Negative 5i times negative 5i is positive 25i squared. So I'm going to combine like terms. This positive 25i squared becomes negative 25. So it's 9 minus 25 is negative 16. Negative 15i is negative 30i. Okay, so let's take a look at E. All right, so E is 3 plus the square root of negative 4 plus 2 minus the square root of negative 36. So this is 3 plus the square root of negative 4 is 2i. Plus 2 minus the square root of negative 36 is 6i. So we're just adding combined like terms. 3 plus 2 is 5. 2i minus 6i is negative 4i. Okay, let's take a look at F. So F is 9 minus the square root of negative 24 minus 3 minus the square root of negative 54. All right, so those radicals are not perfect squares. So this is 9 minus I, the square root of 24, minus 3 minus I, the square root of 54. So we have to simplify those radicals. So this is square root of 4, square root of 6. So that is 9 minus 2I, the square root of 6, minus 54 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 6. So it's 3 minus 3I, the square root of 6. Make sure you distribute the negative. So it's 9 minus 2I, the square root of 6. Minus 3 plus 3i, the square root of 6. Combine like terms, 9 minus 3 is 6. Negative 2i, the square root of 6, plus 3i, the square root of 6, would be positive 1i, the square root of 6. Okay, so let's take a look at 7. Okay, so 7 is the difference quotient. So here's the formula, f of x plus h minus f of x over h. And h cannot be equal to 0 because then it's undefined. All right, so f of x is equal to 4x plus 7. So I start by taking, this is my input, and I input it in for my x here. So it's 4 times x plus h, then I have plus 7, minus, go back to the formula, minus f of x, which is a binomial 4x plus 7, over h. Distribute the 4. 4x plus 4h plus 7 minus 4x minus 7 over h. 4x minus 4x cancels, 7 minus 7 cancels, so I'm left with 4h over h, which is equal to 4. And B. Okay, so obviously same formula. F of x plus h minus f of x over h, and h cannot be equal to 0. Okay, so my function is f of x is equal to x squared plus 3x minus 2. So I start by using this as my input it into the two x's. So it's x plus h squared plus 3 times x plus h minus 2 minus your f of x, so that's the whole thing, x squared plus 3x minus 2 over h. All right, so we should all be good with x plus h squared. That's x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Distribute the 3 plus 3x plus 3h minus 2. Distribute the negative minus x squared minus 3x plus 2 over h. Now simplify. X squared and x minus x squared cancel. Positive 3x, negative 2, positive 2. So I'm left with 2xh plus h squared plus 3h over h. Reduce the h's. So I have 2x plus h plus 3, and that's your final answer. Okay, so let's take a look at number 8. Okay, so number 8 is to rationalize the denominator. You want to get rid of the I in the denominator. So a monomial, you just have to multiply numerator and denominator by I. So for this one, the numerator is a binomial, so make sure you distribute. So it's 4i minus 10i squared over 2i squared. So negative 10i squared, remember, is plus 10. So I have 4i plus 10 over, this becomes negative 2. So I'm just going to rewrite this. 10 over negative 2 plus 4i over negative 2. So that's negative 5 minus 2i. Okay, so B is 5 over 3 minus 4i. So we multiply by the conjugate since it's a binomial. That would be 3 plus 4i. So in the numerator, you have to make sure you distribute. So that's 15 plus 20i. In the denominator, you have to distribute. So that's 9 plus 12i minus 12i minus 16i squared. So positive 12i and negative 12i cancel out. Minus 16i squared becomes plus 16. So that's 15 plus 20i over 9 plus 16 is 25. Now I want to reduce. So it's 15 over 25 plus 20i over 25. All right, so I have 15 over 25 is 3/5. Plus 20 over 25 would be 4/5 I. Okay, and let's take a look at the last one. Okay, so for the last one, you have to find the relative mins and maxes and the interval where the function is increasing and decreasing. Any decimals round to the nearest hundredth. All right, so you're going to plug this into your calculator. F of x equals x squared minus 4x minus 12, and just draw a sketch. All right, so your graph looks something like this. So it has one relative min, that's this point here. So you use your calculator, do second calc, min, left bound, right bound. And this point comes out to be 2, negative 16. This is your min. So make sure that is labeled as your minimum. All right, so what I want is the x value. I want the 2. So underneath, remember I had you guys draw a number line. Graph this right here, no, 2. To the right is infinity, to the left is negative infinity. Okay, when you read your graph, you read from left to right, so it's going down here, so it's decreasing. And then it goes up here, so it's increasing. All right, so we write it's increasing from 2 to infinity, and it's decreasing from negative infinity to 2. Okay, so let's take a look at B. Put it in your calculator, graph a sketch of it. So it looks something like this. All right, so this is my minimum here, and use your calculator to find your minimum, right? So after you graph it, do second calc min and do left bound, right bound, and your minimum comes out to be, and you can round this, 0.71 comma 6.59, and then do second calc again, find your maximum. So here's my max here. And that is negative 0.71 comma 9.41. And so what I want is this value on my x-axis, which is negative 0.71, and I want this value here on my my x-axis on the right side, 0.71. So remember, we draw a number line right underneath. All right, so you're going to put negative 0.71 right underneath where it is on the x-axis, and 0.71. And let's look at the graph, reading the graph from left to right. So this right in here is increasing. In here it's decreasing. Here it's back to increasing. Also on my number line I have to put infinity and negative infinity here. Okay, so now I just need to write, identify where is it increasing and decreasing. So it's increasing in here. So that's from negative infinity, comma, to negative 0.71. And it's also increasing from 0.71 to infinity. And now it's decreasing in here. So that is negative 0.71 to 0.71. All right, so that's it. And happy studying and have a good night. See you tomorrow.